AI isn't infallible, but I think companies don't really care about that. The way people in HR generally approach screening candidates is I'm looking for a reason to reject a candidate, not a reason to accept them. One thing I'm just seeing through TokyoDev, like the candidates are using AI to customize their job application. That's going to increase the amount of applications companies are receiving through job boards like us or through their own site or their whatever. And that's going to increase the screening burden on the companies.
Yeah.
No matter how advanced AI gets,
No,
I
absolutely.
hope we're still living in a world where people want to talk to people.
Like after like a 20-minute conversation with a recruiter, you should be able to ask your recruiter, like, can you do an elevator pitch and sell me right now? If you call your client right now, how well can you sell me? 20 seconds right now, tops. Can they do it? Can they actually sell yourselves? Where do you see the value of recruiters when it comes to serving the same, I guess, companies that you serve on your job boards? Because a lot of the companies that you have on the job board, I actually work with them myself. And so I'm wondering, like, from your perspective, like, do you feel like agencies are still useful in that sense? Or like, what is your perspective when you talk to your community as well? And like job board versus kind of, recruitment agency, something I want to talk with you about.
Okay, yeah, no, I definitely see there being a place for agencies and recruiters to help people and companies. Um, we, with Tokyo Dev, I think we're a job board that serves companies best when they're looking for a position that can accept like a wide range of candidates. Like they're looking for, say, a back-end developer. There's a whole bunch of people out there and they can put people through some screening process, and there's going to be enough candidates actually applying to the position through people like us that they can fill it. Recruiters are more useful when you're looking to fulfill something that is like a highly specialized position, especially senior ones. And for instance, in Japan, when you're looking for, say, a bilingual engineering manager, those people are pretty rare to begin with. They're in demand enough that they already are probably at a pretty good job. And so for a company to get someone like that, they actually need to kind of like poach them from an existing job. And because these candidates aren't necessarily actively looking for a job, they probably aren't as likely to be using like job boards like us. And so in that kind of case, a recruiter can come in and help a company get someone, like push them
Yeah.
away from their current job. Like I think the key thing a recruiter can do that we can't do as a job board is like be persistent and almost like to a nagging degree, like, hey, you should check out this opportunity. You're pushing the candidate that way. And then
Mm,
you go to the company and you can like push the company. This is a good person. And you can keep following up with them and you can get an answer and you can be persistent. And
yeah.
that's not something we do as a job board. We're just more, here's an opportunity for you. You can apply if you're interested. We send your application off to the company, and the company decides whether or not they want
Mm.
to interview you. And it's kind of just this really like light interaction, which has its own advantages, but it also has disadvantages.
Yeah, for me, whenever I meet like I guess very junior people, I will also send them to your job board usually. Like because I feel like companies, if I send it like a more, let's say, and when I say junior, it's like probably less than 3 years of experience. Like let's say a backend a developer, less than 3 years experience. I will usually just tell them like you should probably apply to a job board, and once you do, let me know, and I can kind of just let maybe one of my contacts at those companies know that you applied, because I feel like a lot of more junior people make the mistake to go to recruiters. And as soon as the recruiter will send a profile, the companies usually will say no, thank you, because they don't want to pay the hiring fee. Doesn't mean they're not interested in the actual candidate. It just means that they don't want to pay an agency fee for someone that junior. And I see a lot of times that where like the job boards are extremely important in that case.
Yeah, I mean, I think right now in the current market, juniors struggle regardless,
Mm,
but I think it's also like you're right in pointing out that the recruiter's business model influences whether or not someone gets a job. It also kind of influences how willing a recruiter is to work with someone because, like, as a recruiter, you are not that scalable. You have a limited amount of time. And so you have to focus your efforts on the people who you think you can actually help out there, right? And so because of that, like if someone doesn't really fit the mold so well, I think a recruiter has a challenging time helping them. Like you mentioned, for instance, someone more junior, but it could also be like someone is more senior, but they're looking to like totally change
Yeah.
industries or like change even job titles or something like that. Like recruiters are really good at fitting people into slots that already exist. But when you're wanting to go outside of that, then
Mm.
something like a job board can help. But even then, depending on how far you're going, like you need to really take it into your own hands there and figure out how you can sell yourself there.
Yeah. Like I remember, like I mean, there were several reasons why. So I left, I guess, the bigger agencies sites like almost a year ago now, probably. Yeah. But I remember like several times that I met with people in the market, like hiring managers, and they were like, "Oh, we don't really need recruiters. We're very happy with TokyoDev or even Japan Dev or whatever." Like, and I just remember this happening more and more often. I was like, "Okay, it feels like we need as recruiters to really step up and start providing more value because if they don't see it, and that's why we started, we start doing all those events. Now we're doing the podcasting. We try to, I guess, create this entire transparency in the market so that people can just apply by themselves if they're active. That's where I feel like we should not really intervene too much because they're already active. And same with the job board, right? You're serving the people who are active. They know that they want to move. What we do more for our clients is, like you said, like we go really poach people from companies and say, hey, did you actually know about this company? They're looking. And so I do see the value for both models. You what would you recommend to, like, I guess, more junior people or like people right now that you say are struggling to find a job? Like how, let's say, imagine you are on the market, you have 2, 3 years experience. How would you kind of tackle the problem to find a job right now as a full stack developer, for example?
Okay, well, I think the best way to get a job is not using either of us, but
Mm,
through referral at the company. Basically, through knowing someone who works there, because that's a way you can normally bypass at least the initial screening and maybe get into an interview or something like that. And so the way you can do that is just like expanding your own personal network. And a good way of doing that is attending events like the ones we organize. Um, there's also like if you're a developer, there's a lot of opportunities to kind of show off your skills through doing different things, such as like give a presentation at an event. I organize an event for Ruby developers. And one of my challenges as an organizer is just getting people who's willing to present at the event. And so if anyone ever comes to me and they want to present something, I'm like happy to work with them to come up with what their presentation is going to be about. I can help them refine their slides or whatever. So it just kind of takes that spark of
will that
willingness.
presentation be like a pitch about a product they are building? Like what is the presentation about usually?
Okay, so if you're like a Ruby developer, then it would be something you're doing or have learned that is related to Ruby. And I think people get a bit caught up in that, like, a presentation has to be on a topic where you personally have a lot of expertise
Mm,
about, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that deep. Like it can be you spend a week of like evenings just researching something on your own and then present about it. Because there's a lot of topics out there where like even though I've been developing for like 20 years, I don't know everything that's going on. And like it can be useful to have like even a surface level presentation about some technology or something, because then it just introduces me, hey, there's this thing out there. I can maybe use it for something I'm doing later. I can research it later myself in more depth,
mm.
but it just helps get that idea out there.
What's the benefit? for the person presenting, like what's your perception of that? Like because I feel like it's like you say, people probably don't want to do it. First of all, it's scary. Like public speaking is scary. It probably takes a bit of time to set up the presentation, but like, what are the benefits from doing it? Would you say?
Yeah, well, I guess the benefit is that exactly that, like, not many people are willing to go through this hassle, and so it's making you stand out just by doing that, and, like, I think a lot of developers are like myself, kind of introverted people, and it can be like hard to meet people at a networking event where you just say, go talk about something.
Mm,
But if you give a presentation at an event, then it naturally has people come to you after and want to talk to you about something you already know something about. So there's that. It helps get your name in people's minds. Like, it won't just be like when you're getting a referral directly, but there's certain people I know in the, say, Tokyo developer community where I've seen them around enough that, like, if they were ever applying for a job with me, I definitely want to interview them.
mm,
It because the Tokyo international developer community, it's grown a lot over the years, but it's still really small. So yeah, I think it increases just opportunities there. Um, I think in general though, like stuff like participating in communities like this, it's not something that works if you really approach it as transactional.
right.
Like, you can't be expecting, I'm going to present at this event and I'm going to get a job out of it. It's
Mm,
more like you're slowly building up your kind of credit in the community, and
yeah.
eventually that will give you lots of returns. And it's something that you can do that's just, like, maybe more positive, like, it has some measurable effect on you, and it's something you can point to as an accomplishment, as opposed to just, like, applying to random jobs that you might
Yeah.
not be, qualified for, and, like, you don't actually get anything out of that when you're done.
Yeah, I agree. But like, I think what it's kind of getting out of your comfort zone in the end, right? Like you're an introvert,
Yeah.
and like even like you're coming to do this podcast with me. You organize events a lot yourself, so you kind of got to a conclusion at some point that like doing more and more of those uncomfortable things is beneficial for you. And
Yeah.
like I feel like that's the hard part. It's hard to for people to see that.
Yeah, no, it's definitely hard to do things like that in public,
Mm,
but especially if you're coming from a software developer background where a lot of us aren't comfortable with doing that, it's an easy way to kind of stand out. And the
mm,
more you can stand out, the easier it will be to kind of advance your career. And so, yeah, I encourage people to maybe try try to figure out what they can do that will help them stand out. And it needs to be something that not everyone else is doing,
yeah.
because if everyone else is doing, you won't stand out. And so I gave the example of presenting at an event, but it could be like writing an article instead about some new technology you used, and then you have it on your personal blog, and you can point uh, potential employers to it when you're applying if it's relevant, and it's highlighting your skills as a writer, and like your ability to write English or Japanese or whatever is often
Mm,
more important to get a developer job than your skills as like a Ruby programmer or whatever. Um,
mm,
because like a lot of our jobs are about communication.
true.
Um,
On top of your mind, like which I guess benefits did you see in your life from organizing those events, doing those presentations, and maybe also for the people that you helped to go through that? Like, what did you see happening that will encourage people to do more of that?
Yeah, so basically all my success in business has come out of like going to community events, participating in them and whatnot. So I've had 3 businesses in Japan,
Mm,
and all of them have been connected to the community. The first one was after I came here, and I was working for a Japanese startup for a while and left that, and I created with some other people a technical consultancy where we were helping like international companies build mobile
you
web.
had some big clients because I checked your
Yeah.
LinkedIn. I saw some really huge names. So I was like, how big was the team when you were doing that? Actually,
Yeah, yeah, that was just with 2 other developers there,
Those like,
and
what were the like? I just remember like I was like, wait,
so
what?
we had for clients, our first big client was Estee Lauder
Mm.
companies.
Yeah,
Then we also had like Match.com, PayPal, and Bosch, and some other
that's a huge names,
international
man.
companies, and it was pretty almost yeah, it was really unexpected when we got the call from them like a couple months
What
after
was
we
the
had
service you
started.
were providing?
Um, okay, so we have to go back to 2008. It's before the iPhone had a big market share in Japan, right around when it was coming out. But Japan already had a fairly rich mobile web where people had their kind of feature phones, like flip phones that they could browse the web on. And with those Japanese web had a bunch of idiosyncrasies with it that made like developing for it challenging. And so what my consultancy did was help those international companies understand how they can adapt their like for instance, for Estee Lauder, their web store to the Japanese market. And we got some of our clients through just participating in events. For instance, at that time, there was a networking event called Mobile Monday Tokyo, and we were volunteering at that event and making connections there. And that's how we got some of our early clients. Um, so that was my first business. My second business was Doorkeeper, which is an event
We use
registration
it
platform.
all the time.
Yeah.
We
So
love it. It's amazing. It's such
so
a good app.
I exited that a couple of years ago,
Mm.
but that also started actually because of Mobile Monday. We started off like helping them do ticketing for their event because they had a couple hundred attendees who they wanted to check in, and they were using a paper list. And so we built up something using QR codes that we could scan to check people in. And um, we launched the product. Well, eventually we met all of Mobile Monday Tokyo's needs, and we launched the product for wider audience to use. And initially, not really anyone adopted it. It was like in the first month, maybe one organizer used it,
What
and
was the why? Why didn't it get more traction? Because it seems like it solves a real issue, right?
because we were developers and we thought we'll just build something, put it out there, and it's cool.
And
People will
assume
start
people use it
using
because
it.
it's
There
good.
was no marketing going on,
Mm.
and so we never really did do so much marketing of it directly, but what we did do was keep participating in like the Tokyo Tokyo developer community. And after about a year of being active in that, more and more events that we were just kind of friendly with the organizers with or helping out with or whatever, they started adopting us, and that then started to snowball up to the point where we were having like 2,000 events a month using
Mm.
it. And so all of that came out of just being active in the community, helping other
Mm.
organizers, and then they wanted to help us back.
I want to ask you, like, when you are like you mentioned, you're friendly, you're building those relationships. Are you also strategic? Is it in the back of your mind, like it's also about making the sale? Because I mean, you are actually a great salesman, basically, right? Like through this whole process. But is it like, and I know it's genuine, that's just what I'm asking, but like, is it something that you keep in the back of your mind? Like, let's just build rapport first and then we start actually selling the product? Or like, or is it just like the product's so damn good and because people at some point build rapport with you, they look into the product? Like,
I mean, maybe I should have been more strategic about it, and that was one of the challenges we had with Doorkeeper was because events are such a wide area and we're like, we're gonna help anyone, we're gonna
mm,
make it any of their feature requests they're having for us. We're developers, we can quickly do it. Uh, we quickly built out the product in many different directions, whereas like in retrospect, I think we should have been a bit more strategic with these are the kinds of events that we wanted to go after. But at the time, it was more just this is something cool. It wasn't even really a business at that time. It was just like wanting to help people out there.
mm. It's interesting. Do you think there's a lot of like very good developers basically that have an amazing product, but because they don't necessarily, have the business sense, they don't have the marketing aspect, that there are a lot of products out there that basically never really see the market? Do you feel like that's a thing?
I think it is definitely a trap we can fall into, and it's quite easy for us to invest a lot of time in the thing that we love doing, which is writing code. But
Mm,
at the end of the day, if like no one's using your code, it kind of doesn't matter. Which was like kind of ironic because that was like why I left the first Japanese startup was because I felt like they don't have a good business model and like though the development team was good and we were writing good code and stuff, it wasn't feeling like it was going anywhere. And
mm.
it took me a while to kind of get over that. And I think actually TokyoDev, my latest and current business, was kind of a direct reaction to that, in that it started as my personal blog where I was
It's
just
like 15 years ago, right?
yeah, where I was just writing about these Japanese developer events I was attending, and, like, I wanted to share them with the world there, and because I was the only one writing about being a developer in Japan in English at that time, naturally, it got good SEO, and people were coming to me looking for advice about how to find jobs here, and I wrote articles about that, which got more people to come, and I got I started a mailing list where I just send out the occasional opportunity I came across that was for English speakers in Tokyo, and, like, wasn't a business then, I wasn't making any money, but I just wanted to help people, and then I had, heard about a couple people had already gotten jobs through the mailing list, and around the same time, I was hearing how much recruiters are
Yeah.
charging, and I'm like, "There's something between free and 30% of the salary or whatever that companies are willing to pay," and so I slowly started creating a business out of it. Um, but yeah, as I was kind of creating this business, I was like, I don't want to build technology for this business. I want to keep things as simple as possible. And so for a long time, it was just like a simple HTML website. There wasn't even a job board. It was just like a mailing list, like MailChimp that I was using, and everything was just off the
So you're
shelf.
like forcing yourself to not like go in full developer mode and like make, because even when we did build a, I guess, a simple job board for ourselves, and I kept calling it the spaceship, and I was like, it has to do this, has to have a bot that to Discord and all those things. And in the end, we're 1 year later and we have the simplest job board ever because we completely dropped everything and we're like, just as long as it works. But did you have to force yourself to not go into like building the best job board right away possible? And was that count against your
Yeah, no,
nature?
I waited a really long time to even have a job board section of my blog. And then eventually now it has morphed into a job board and there is a bit more software behind it. But I still try and think of Tokyo Dev as not like a software company, but
Mm,
if anything, we're more of a content company. And that's kind of where we can add more value is through the content we're creating around in the site. Then also like helping the employers refine their job postings and stuff like that, figuring out ways of better highlighting them. And then also recently we've been investing a lot more in the kind of community around the site there and building up that stuff. So technology, though we are investing more in it than we were before,
mm,
um, we want to keep our focus kind of away from that side of things and more on the other aspects where I think it's a lot easier to add value for spending less resources. So yeah, that's what I've been focused on.
like in terms of the positive impact of your company is like, I mean, of Tokyo Dev is pretty obvious, I think, because for every job that someone gets, and those young, because you most of your clients are young startups, right? Or like,
So yeah, that goes back to how it started was Tokyo Dev's first clients were connections I had through the developer community. They were typically like I knew the CTO of the company who was another international person in Japan, and they had smallish team and were looking to grow. Um, since then, uh, I think the ecosystem in Japan has evolved a lot. Around 2019, we experienced a lot of growth, and I think we were kind of riding this wave up as more and more Japanese companies, both established ones and new startups, were looking to hire international developers. And yeah, I think we we now have a mix of clients from earlier stage startups up until the kind of PayPays and Mercaris and
Yeah.
that kind of scale.
Which still, I guess, the culture is still very much a startup for those companies as well. And like, because I do have friends there as well. And it seems like, I mean, there are established companies, but the culture is still very like startup. I mean, bilingual as well, or even English only. A lot of the jobs that you have out there are English only as well, right?
Yeah, that's our focus is on helping English speakers who speak little to no Japanese get
Yeah.
jobs in Japan, just because if you're like a bilingual Japanese speaker, or if you speak Japanese at a fluent level, you can get any job in Japan as a developer. There's no need to restrict yourself to a platform like ours. Um, but on the other hand, if you only speak English, especially if you aren't even based in Japan already, there are very limited opportunities available for you. And so one of our values is being able to collect all those opportunities and make them
Mm.
easier to find for people.
Yeah, no, everything you do in terms of business, you always want just to actually help people, and then you kind of take a step back and you find like a certain business model. You mentioned the first customers for TokyoDev were like actually, I guess, friends, like people that you met through the community and
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, like
How hard is it then to actually charge people, like ask for money? Because I feel like this is sometimes where people also get stuck. They create so much value, but they never really know when is the right time to actually start charging people. Like, how hard is that?
yeah, maybe it's been harder for me to charge enough money than charge money just because well, one, I saw recruiters are getting paid large sums of money. Secondly, I guess I had people telling me, "I'll pay you money if you can help me find a developer." And so it was like
Nice.
they were already saying to me that, like signaling that they're willing to pay money. And then I guess also I'm not charging individuals to use this service. Like I wouldn't want to charge developers,
Mm,
and make money off them. I rather make money off the companies because, I know as a business owner, it's easy to spend money as a business expense compared to a personal
true.
expense, right? Like, you need to kind of spend money to make money as a
Mm,
business, and you can be quite rational about it. And whenever you're a business and you have an opportunity to pay something and get a lot of value back, it's like you're happy to pay. I mean,
mhm,
TokyoDev now has a number of contractors working for us, and I'm like happy to pay the people there because they're adding more value to
yeah.
my company and more than I could do on my own. And so, it's great to be able to pay money to people to help them do things.
Yeah. Like how big is the team now, Tokida?
So we have about 7 contractors working with us.
Okay.
Um, all of them are part-time, so it's not like I have that many full-time employees, but together they're
Nice.
worth a couple at least.
Yeah, and like I also see all the articles that you guys have. Like, is that written by the clients, or do you guys have a ghostwriter taking care of it? Like, or who's actually writing all the articles? Like, beside the ones that you obviously post under your name.
So we have 2 kinds of articles we're having on TokyoDev right now. We have the articles that are along the lines of the ones that I was writing, which their goal is to help uh, other international developers either already based here or looking to relocate here. And so those articles are written by people like me or other people at TokyoDev. And then we've also been successful at helping other outside contributors who have had some unique experience right for the site. Like we've had one of the first recipients of the J-Find visa and digital nomad visa and other kind of obscure things write for our site, and then we have an editing team that helps improve their articles. So that's like one class of articles where they are like purely about content to help people directly. Then our other class of articles are developer stories, which we write to kind of feature individuals working at our clients' companies. And those are a bit more branding for the company
Yeah,
in that the company themselves is involved in them, but they are based on us interviewing developers and
nice.
having a conversation like this, and they are like real opinions of the
Yeah,
people there. And we just want to use them to highlight like what it's actually like working there and kind of what maybe some of the good things are and what
yeah.
the environment is, because like we want people to not only get a job at the company but also stay there.
You want to provide more value than just the actual job description, basically, right? Like
Yeah,
a
so okay.
deeper picture of the whole aspect.
So that's job descriptions have been one challenge for me in that like I sometimes feel like I care more about a company's job description than the person at the company does themselves.
Mm.
Maybe because like our job board is all about job descriptions. That's like I've reviewed a
What's the
thousand
problem that you
plus.
see?
But the problem is people aren't are too much thinking about themselves. They're thinking about what I want.
Like the hiring company,
The
right?
hiring company is phrasing it in terms of these are the requirements for the job. You need to meet this, this, and this. And maybe they have some responsibilities, something like that. But they aren't really approaching it from the perspective of I need to sell a candidate on this job. So they aren't necessarily highlighting what's good about the opportunity or even what's good about the company. And it can be like challenging for companies also to see what is unique about them, especially within the context of the companies on TokyoDev, because they're saying we're unique because we have an international development team who speaks English, we have remote work,
They all
we
say
have
that.
flex time,
Yeah.
and like all of these things that are totally exceptional in Japan as a whole, but among our clients are not necessarily. And
Hmm.
so we found by like talking to the developers themselves, they often have like a better idea of what's interesting or good about the company from a developer's perspective than say someone in HR
Yeah.
there. And so it's been a these developer stories have been like a valuable way of figuring out what's actually interesting
Yeah,
about the
it
companies.
works amazingly, and a good friend of both Wannes and myself, Eugene from Meets More,
Yeah.
he spoke so highly about you and about the article, what it did for them, and like just understanding that whole aspect of like don't just put a generic job board out there, not a generic job description. And I feel like even on the recruitment side is the same problem that we see all the times. Like we get all those job descriptions that look the same, and the clients expect us to sell their company, and it's like, hey, you barely give me any information on what you do. And yeah, it's like that's why we do the community as well, because when we actually support the startups that we work with, it's usually through the people that we know. So we'll just like have a chat with this person and figure out if this job is right for you, and then if you feel, then we're happy to make an introduction. And we kind of, I guess, through the same way as what you do, right? Like what does it look like, but more deeply. And then we start. Also, I do truly believe that this market is unique in the sense that there's such a shortage of candidates, where, like you say, companies that don't really understand that and don't put the effort to sell themselves to the candidates, they're making a big mistake. Like every time I introduce a candidate to one of my clients, I'm always like, how are you going to sell your job to them, to that candidate? And I will tell the candidate to prepare them well for an interview is like ask all the questions that you want, and the red flags that you have maybe experienced in previous companies, make sure they're not there. And like, but people always like, but I'm applying for a job, can I ask all this stuff in the first interview? I'm like, yeah. This is a candidate centered market, like power to the candidates. Like, of course you have to be respectful, but it's really about finding that match and not the typical job application, I guess, right? So,
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And also, the more you can kind of ask questions as a candidate, you're also establishing yourself as like someone who's in demand. This is more a conversation of kind of equals rather than I'm kind of like looking up at you as a company. And I think that as long as you do it in a respectful way,
yeah,
it reflects good on you as a candidate and can
yeah,
help your chances. Um,
yeah, absolutely. Like we let's talk a little bit about, I guess, AI, because this is a big one, and I feel like I think maybe you saw, like, I think a month ago, LinkedIn announced this whole self-working AI recruitment agent that's potentially called, kind of like, I guess, first of all, completely get rid of TokyoDev's job board and also us as recruiters. In theory, like, where do you see AI taking the whole recruitment market?
Yeah, no, that's something I've been thinking a lot about recently. I think it's definitely going to affect recruiting somehow. I'm not sure exactly how things will end up, but I see it coming from all sides. You mentioned kind of the screening aspect, but even before that, one thing I'm just seeing through Tokyo Dev is people like the candidates are using AI to customize their job application is kind of the first step, but there are also then tools out there that will let you automatically apply for jobs. And because it's using AI, each one of your applications will be then customized to the given company. And so that's going to increase the amount of applications companies are receiving through
Mm,
job boards like us or through their own site or their whatever, and that's going to increase the screening burden on the companies. And it's not just that they're receiving more applications, it's that they're receiving applications that look at first glance like they could be good applications. Even if they aren't, they're going to like look like they are, and so it means the recruiter screening them is going to spend more of their time before they realize this is actually a dud application and reject it. And so as that happens, I see it's kind of inevitable that companies are going to turn to AI for screening applications.
mm,
I look at the different like applicant tracking systems that are available, and they're announcing like AI screening features. And I think so far these screening features, like they're phrasing it as we're not like rejecting candidates using them, but we're just highlighting the strengths of the candidates and how they match this position. But there are some trouble with that. Like AI isn't infallible. It will often make mistakes and maybe it doesn't highlight
mm,
someone who should be a match for the position. But I think companies don't really care about that. I've
mm,
observed that, like, companies are okay with rejecting applicants who are a good potential match. Like, I think the first level, the way people in HR generally approach screening candidates is I'm looking for a reason to reject a candidate, not a reason to accept them.
mm,
And so if they don't get a perfect score from this AI, it's like reject them just to decrease my workload there. And then that has a whole bunch of issues because like there's evidence that like AI is biased. Like I remember reading an article about how Amazon was doing AI screening before, but dropped it because they found that their AI was like penalizing people who had stuff like woman, the
mm,
word in their resume there, and that there was gender bias kind of built into that. And so that's one issue. There's also the issue it's not really transparent to the candidate at all. Like,
yeah,
how this is happening there. And so I guess I kind of like worry about the future there in that I think AI is kind of really great at doing a mediocre job of things.
yeah,
And so a lot of people are going to maybe get thrown to the wayside who shouldn't be, and it maybe benefits the people most who are already kind of the most successful there and hurts the people who maybe are in a more unique circumstance there.
Mm,
And so, yeah, for Tokyo Dev at least, we don't really want to do any like AI screening or something like that for us. And we want to maybe more just focus on the side of things that is unique and that AI can't replicate. And that's stuff like building communities. Like
yeah.
no matter how advanced AI gets,
No,
I hope
absolutely.
we're still living in a world where people want to talk to people. And that's one area we are going to continue to invest in. And even stuff like creating really good written content. Like AI can create okay, kind of regurgitated content, but it can't really create, at least not yet,
Yeah.
really stuff that involves original research is really well written. That's interesting. Like you can generally still tell when something is written
Yeah.
by AI there, and it gives people like a weird feeling when they
Do you think that feeling will disappear though? Because the more you're exposed to something, the more you're kind of maybe willing to accept it. And like, I know, for example, my entire LinkedIn feed, for example, these days, it's probably 60, 70% is AI written at this point. Like at least people write something, then they run it through GPT to just slightly improve it or whatever. But like, and you're just starting to just accept it at this point. And I remember how I felt in the beginning, and I also realize now that that feeling is kind of starting to disappear because we use it all the time ourselves. And in the end, it's about the message that gets out. Like it's and so I'm like, okay, that tolerance is getting higher and higher of like, well, it's AI written, but what's the problem? Um, I think the issue with all the tools that are getting so good is we're still not fixing one of the problems you mentioned, is like the job descriptions, how companies actually write a job description. So if you don't fix that issue, you can have the best screening in the world, but you're looking for the wrong person. Like,
Yeah, that's something I totally agree with because it's not just the job descriptions, it's the resumes. Like, we know both sides of this
yeah,
are kind of crap. And it's like if you're using AI with two pieces of crap for input,
yeah,
you're going to get crap out of it
yeah,
there. And it is definitely challenging, but I think the recruiters who are the best can spot candidates that on paper don't look great, but they have some sort of spark about them because those are exactly the people who aren't getting a million job opportunities from different companies. And if you can identify what their real unique strengths are that aren't necessarily on paper, that are really going to slot well into this organization and add a lot of value, that's the best thing possible there. And
yeah.
that's where like you guys can do something that an AI can't do.
Yeah, most of the time when I get an interview for a candidate or something, one of the relationship that I have with my clients is usually around like I only send a resume if you agree to meet that person. So I will explain what the person did, I'll explain what they built, like where they were in the project, and if okay, we're gonna have an interview with that person, great, I'm sending the resume. And that's often the way I want to work because like especially now everyone has the same looking resume, and I talk to clients and they're like, they interview more and more people because everyone looks good on paper, and they end up having so many meetings of like after 5 6 minutes they realize that person has a very surface level understanding of whatever is written in the resume, because I'm pretty sure what people do is they adapt their resume according to the job description they apply for. And so you, like you say, is that crap on one side, crap on the other side, and like
Well,
you end up
yeah,
with zero
I think
solutions.
the good people are the ones who take the time to adapt it, but yes, still. I am curious though, like how did you get yourself in a position where you can basically dictate terms like that to your clients?
um like I work in industry, like I cover an industry like robotics, AI is like, especially robotics, for example. The salaries are pretty low. Those startups tend to not have the most competitive salaries in the market. So they need to understand that whatever you want, you have to adapt to whatever is available. And a lot of times, the people going into those companies, they actually take a pay cut. So you're getting into that position where it's like, okay, client, like you have to be realistic here and understand that whatever you look for, it's so cutting edge that most of people that you look for don't even exist. Like you look for someone with, I don't know, 10 years of experience in like a specific framework in robotics, like Ross, for example. It's so hard to find. So you need to accept that whatever traditional, again, job description that you wrote, it's not going to happen. And the pain of not finding that person is actually higher than hiring someone with less experience. And so most of the people that we place, we don't even place them according to a job description. We just say, hey, this person has done this, spoke to your team, and it seems like you guys are lacking resources on that or that team, and this guy could probably be a good fit. And usually, I already have something like, I already connected this guy to your lead guy. They had a chat. They seem to be getting along. Why don't you interview him? And then it's a matter of like, either I just say, don't worry, this is an introduction as a friend, or I'm like, okay, you will never find someone like this. And then we go through the traditional, I guess, agency fee system. But so it came more from me understanding that this industry is so new and needs a different approach than the traditional agency side of things. And also, like, the other thing is, the way I look at it is, if I meet someone for 30 minutes, I spend 30 minutes talking to that person, I need to land them an interview. It's freaking important. I don't want to send a resume and not get an interview for that person because we just spent combined like an hour of time, right? 30 minutes on my side, 30 minutes on the candidate side. So I kind of approach it to the client always that way, say, hey, I did spend my time explaining to the candidate what you guys do, and the least you can do is meet that person. And then the agreement is also on the side of like, hey, if after 5 to 10 minutes you realize it's not a match, just stop the meeting. Kindly tell the candidate like we shouldn't continue. And I think that's I mean, I've seen a lot of recruiters wasting so much time, and I think that's where the poor experience for candidates always comes from. It's just everyone's wasting time talking about the wrong things, talking about the. So yeah, observing. I'm very time conscious, I guess, and maybe same philosophy as you. Is like, you want to create value, you want to be useful to people, you want to help people, and that's how I got to that point where with clients saying, I dictate this because I genuinely believe I know better. I'm in the market all day long talking to people. Yeah.
Among my audience, I think a lot of them have bad impressions of recruiters because they've had previous poor experiences with them where like they aren't really actually listening to them or just forwarding the resumes or stuff like that. And so what advice would you give someone on like how to both find a recruiter who's
Mm.
actually going to help them and then maybe like evaluate that as well, like evaluate a recruiter so they aren't wasting their time?
I'm so happy you're asking me this because we want to start creating more and more content around this. And I think if I'm someone with less than, for candidates with less than, I will say, 5 years of experience, less than 4 years of experience, don't use recruiters. Like, honestly, don't, because of the candidate ownership thing, because of the fee tends to be between 30 and 40% of your year salary. Like, companies don't want to pay such a fee for you because they can probably land someone with twice your experience for a slightly higher fee, right? Doesn't mean the company doesn't want to hire you. So if you don't have at least that amount of experience, I will not go through a recruiter actually. The other way to evaluate a recruiter, I would say, is like, have a chat with them and figure out, have you ever placed someone with my skill sets? Like, let's say you're again a backend developer, specifically working in C++, just to keep context in robotics. If you ask a recruiter like, which companies do you usually place backend people in, and they just throw you like, I don't know, banking companies that use Java, or they throw more like just pure machine learning companies like Python, you already can start having sense that, okay, that person is probably not going to send my profile to the right people. The tech stack doesn't align. So maybe the question you should ask is like, do you think I match well the clients that you, and they say yes, they either probably don't know what they're talking about, or they're just bad faith. The other question I will always ask a recruiter is like, what are the chances of you getting me interviews? Like, because if you send my profile to a company, your agency owns my application for the next coming 12 to 18 months. So what are the chances of you landing me an interview should be something you ask. Because if they're like, oh, I'm pretty sure, well, what does pretty sure means? Like, if you don't get me an interview, can you retract my application? Because then I probably can try to apply by myself. So I think as a candidate, I will have a set of questions really to qualify. First of all, does this recruiter have experience placing people like myself? Do they actually understand what I do? And how well will they sell me? Like after like a 20-minute conversation with a recruiter, you should be able to ask your recruiter, like, can you do an elevator pitch and sell me right now? If you call your client right now, how well can you sell me? 20 seconds right now, tops. Can they do it? Can they actually sell yourself? So, right? Like, so I feel like often what happens is candidates in the market, they look at a recruiter as a shortcut, not really understanding that most of the time they're shooting themselves in the foot because and recruiters are not bad people, right? That's the whole thing. They're just they got into the job because well, they don't want to teach English anymore usually, or they don't want to do another, low paying job that whatever the reason. Then they get into like a position that their manager put them in. They have to hit certain numbers, and they look at the candidate as like, great, this is a KPI for this week. And so you have that issue always. I think boutique, smaller recruitment agencies, when it comes to tech recruitment, are the best because the fees are, I guess, lower when it comes to startups, but because it's a smaller agency, you don't really mind. It's still good money. So yeah, I think candidates should be a lot more cautious about who they work with as a recruiter, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
uh, yeah, I guess that made me wonder as you kind of build out this agency, like how are you planning or are you uh structuring compensation? Like as you mentioned, like lots of recruiters are put under like lots of pressure to make sales, and that leads to a lot of them working in a really transactional fashion. But from what I've seen of you guys so far, you're doing a lot of stuff that doesn't directly lead to placing candidates.
Mm.
And so as you kind of grow the company, how are you going to continue with that?
Yeah. The the one thing I already know, my partner Wallace, is like we don't want to hire more people, so we want to keep the headcount very low, so that the amount of revenue doesn't have to really go higher anymore. Already, we're profitable, we're doing fine, and I think we probably, if let's say we talk to 100 people, we probably only place, I don't know, 5 to 10 people in that, and it's enough. But if I start hiring more and more people, that's where the problem comes, right? Like that's the whole traditional way of scaling a recruitment company is what makes the candidate experience poor, I think. And so for us, we're gonna stay lean and mean, right? Like we don't want to hire more people. We want to integrate more and more AI when it comes to the fluffy stuff, right? Like scheduling a meeting and all this stuff. We want to start using more and more AI for this kind of stuff and just improve the candidate experience. And that's where the community aspect comes in as well. Because the more people we know and the more people understand how we function, as soon as they're active in the market, either they will go through you in the job board or they will come to us because they know us and they know how connected we are. And so it's just a matter of like being more and more useful and valuable to people around us because that just makes us a trustworthy partner for their next career change. So that's really the way, at least for now, we envision growing. We do the podcast because we feel like there's nothing out there really that does that shows those CEOs of those companies why they're doing what they do, and we showcase all our clients, which traditional agencies don't want to do, right? Because you empower your clients. Okay, they probably don't use so much recruitment services, so we just think, I guess, the same way as you think, right? Like if we can help people save a lot of money and a lot of time, there's another way to probably make money, right? Because people want to work with us, we're useful. So that's kind of the trajectory we're taking.
Yeah, that's definitely similar to how I've been with TokyoDev, and I've kind of been intentional about not scaling it. Well, for a long time, it was just myself doing kind of everything, but it got to the point that we were having enough success with it that it almost felt like a waste to be just taking all the money out of the business and not reinvesting it. And
Mm.
so I kind of felt like I had to bring on new people to that. But I have been kind of strategic about the kinds of people that I brought on, and I don't want to scale it more for the foreseeable future until we kind of settle down again
Yeah.
with what we have right now. Um, but yeah, it's definitely is our advantage if we don't need to make a ton of money because we
Yeah.
don't have a ton of bills to
Yeah.
pay. And like we're fortunate in the recruiting industry in that it is quite lucrative and you don't need to make many placements
Yeah,
to
exactly.
be a viable business there. And so, yeah, I want to kind of take advantage of that situation.
I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, we're running it since only a year, right? But I feel like it's the hack because you can help more and more people and truly do stuff for free because you can afford it. But if you can't afford it, and it's like so a lot of times I'm talking with people and they're like, oh wow, this is incredible, but how can you guys, are you guys truly doing this to help people? I'm just like, It's just good business to help people. It's actually really good business as long as you keep the headcounts very low, at least for us. I mean, our fixed costs, I mean, our rent, we could go like, in Roppongi and have like a very fancy office. No, we decide to be in Sugamo. That helps the candidate experience to be better because our costs are so low. We can literally, someone comes to us and I can't get them a job. It does not matter. I will still connect you to the right people. Why? Because not because I'm a super good person. No, I can afford it. And that's what I think a lot of times happens with those recruiters that have a bad reputation. They just cannot afford it.
Yeah, I don't blame the individual recruiters
Exactly.
there. It's
Yeah.
just like the system that they've set up incentivizes them to just think in the short term there. But
Yeah.
I guess as well, it also helps that you're the owner of the business and
Yeah.
that eventually this stuff will come back. Like maybe you introduce someone for free now, but they get their job, they're definitely going to be coming back to you in the
True.
future. And the more kind of you are helping these companies, even if you aren't directly getting a return on it now, you're
They're
building a
growing.
relationship
Yeah.
with them. And that's also been what we've been trying to do with TokyoDev through well, the developer stories, we don't make money directly on them. We also have started holding events with our clients where we're showcasing kind of what they're doing and bringing them together with our audience. And that's also, we're not making any money off this, but it's like something good is going to come out of it for
Yeah.
the people participating in it, and probably something good for us in the future, even if we don't know exactly what it is. And I just feel so fortunate to be in this position. And it
Same.
was quite different than when I was doing Doorkeeper, which was simultaneously a much bigger, more difficult product but made a lot less money just because of the market I was in. And so with Tokyo Dev, I've been like able to do stuff like sponsor developer conferences and other communities and
Yeah.
help other people out through our success and kind of share it with the community. And I'm really grateful for being able to do that.
Like I am on the because I mean that's one thing I actually want to thank you for this because there's a lot of things that we do in terms of the value proposition that we want to bring to the market that is inspired from TokyoDev and like the articles and just the transparency in general. And we did join your Discord I think a couple months back. And we were looking at it and I was like, this is crazy how organic this is, how people are actually helping each other, giving each other advice. And I think everything that you do, that's the thing. You're just fueling that organic growth as well, right?
Yeah, no, it's like so the Discord community was another thing we just started because, hey, why not? Like, we realized we already have this audience and we don't have any place for them to kind of talk. But it's been amazing for me. One, because like it used to be everyone would email me and ask their questions and I'd answer them. And I'm happy to do that. But I'm just one
Not very
person with one
scalable.
opinion, and yeah, it's both more scalable, but it also gives more diversity of opinions, and, like, I've been in Japan now for, like, 18 years. I found one job as a developer here. I feel like myself getting further away from my audience, and, by engaging the community there, it's a way of kind of keeping things fresh there, and it's also kind of fed into the other aspects of my business, like the content I was talking about earlier, where we have like people who wrote about the digital nomad visa. Like that person was active in our community first, and then they're like, I want to share this experience because of that. And so it's kind of then uh, fueled back into the content, which then brings more people to the community. We've had other people then asking about experiences with digital nomad visas, and it's like that isn't something that directly connects with
Is
our
it
business,
the
but
first digital nomad? Was it Ozan?
that was the J-Find visa.
Yeah, he's a
So
good friend of ours
yeah,
actually.
yeah,
Okay,
he
yeah,
also
yeah.
did an article
And I
for
think I
us.
met him through your article actually, like
Yeah.
because we saw the article, something connected us, and I'm pretty sure you were in that equation actually. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's been great. Like the more, I think he wrote that article because he saw another article about someone who had written about their experiences with the business manager visa, and it's like the more we kind of get out there, the more opportunities it creates.
Yeah. And this is the thing. This is why for me it was very important that when I was looking for a co-founder, I wanted someone who didn't come from the recruitment industry. And like my partner Wannes, he's coming from like the music industry, where all they do is organizing music events. You know, like trying to build, I guess, an audience for like unknown artists and stuff. And just sharing and connecting, good stuff comes out of it. I feel like people really underestimate that whole thing like so much. But again, it's a luxury to have time to do that, right? Like
Yeah, well, it also is a ton of work. Like
it is, it is.
organizing in-person events is a ton of work. Having an online community, it's
How do you
like,
do that, by the way? Like, do you organize all the events yourself, or like, do you have like volunteers helping you out? Like,
okay, so like I have been involved with everything with the offline events. It's actually been helpful in that we get to offload some of the responsibilities on the company itself. Like I was mentioning, it's really hard to get people to present at an event. But if I can get the HR people to look around in their own company for developers to present, it's already getting rid of one of the most
nice.
challenging things to do. And I guess I've been focused on like, how can I keep things as simple as possible and maximize kind of the ROI on the events? Because ultimately, I think a lot of the value of these events just comes out of getting people together in a space. And so we aren't doing anything fancy for it. We order drinks and pizza and have it at the company's office. And so, like, the costs are really low.
Nice.
Organization is pretty straightforward to do. Um, but, you know, it still involves like a commitment to be in a place at this specific time. And there is always the worry about like what happens when something goes wrong. Like, I had one event where I got like COVID the day before and couldn't join it. But that's also where having a team at TokyoDev has helped in that there was other people I could turn to say, yeah, you need to, or can you take over leading this event? And that kind of worked. And I think it also has helped that we've already kind of built up this community and because we have been focused on just supporting the community, it's like
Mhm.
the people are supportive of us back, and I think,
Yeah.
yeah, it's worked out well from that
How
perspective.
long did it take to have the community running as it is right now? Like, would you say?
Okay, so we started the Discord, I think, a bit over 2 years ago or so.
How many members now on the
Um,
Discord?
I think we're around 6,000 members on the Discord. I mean, not everyone's active there,
Nice.
but yeah, it's been great. Like, one of the rewarding things for me has been seeing people who have joined the community while they're overseas and ask questions about what's it like for being a developer in Japan or some specific aspect there. And then they actually get a job in Japan and come over and start helping others there. And so it's yeah, been quite rewarding seeing that. And so we were organizing, we had that community going for about a year, I think. And then people were saying always, we should have some meetup, we should get together. And so we started organizing just some meetups for just the Discord people there. There wasn't any kind of commercial aspect to it.
Mm.
And then just as we've been connecting more with our companies and looking for ways to help them, we thought maybe there's a win-win situation if we can start having the events at companies' offices. They can help us with providing some like interesting content, not like marketing about the company, but stuff developers are actually interested at. And that would help make it more sustainable. And so we've, we're just holding our second event tonight. So,
Okay. Yeah.
but we've had a lot of interest from clients about having these kind of events.
Yeah, no, I thought you did more. So this, okay, only did one. I thought you did a lot more events actually. I don't
Okay,
know why.
so this is our second event in collaboration with companies. We held about 6
Okay,
TokyoDev themed events.
there you go.
I've been organizing Tokyo Rubyist meetups since 2010, and so yeah, I've it's kind of like I've been doing all this kind of community building for the sake of it, and now I'm figuring out how I can kind of balance that with
Mm,
kind of incorporating the business aspect into it without it being just, I don't know, feeling icky. Like
yeah,
I my
this is always hard as well,
yeah.
right? Like I know what you mean. You maybe you see the same thing because I mean we are a lot younger, right? I think we're like around a year now when we started. I think the first event was in a coffee shop of 7 or 8 people and just random, like just gathering some friends and asking what would you guys like as an event. And I guess it's a little bit opposite to you because for you it's kind of, at least from what you're saying, seems like a lot more organic and you're kind of reacting to the demand of the people that you already have kind of coming to you. But for us, it was way more like we want to build a community, we want to do this. So it's a lot more kind of brute force kind of approach and constantly doing an event, asking what people liked, what they didn't like, and kind of keep pushing what people like and try to fix what people didn't like. And but it's very hard to get, I guess, valuable feedback from people because in the end, people are generally just grateful for you setting up an event. And I think we did maybe 15, 16 events in a year. We definitely slowed down a little bit at the end. But one thing that I see is that there's so many communities, so many people doing their events, and I don't see much collaboration. And I feel like that's where if everyone does it for the true good of, I guess, the ecosystem and growth, and like you say, right, the people bringing people from overseas, helping them, and generally just it helps, I guess, Japan to attract great talent. It helps those startups. If everyone really does it for that greater good, there should be a lot more collaboration, I feel like, and a lot more co-events and like what you do with those companies. And I don't really see much of that yet. Like, do you feel the same way or?
Okay. I am coming from the perspective of a developer,
Mm,
and I think among developers ourselves, there are a lot of kind of true community events where there's nothing commercial about it, where it's just like a lot of software developers, it's their career, but it's also their passion.
mm,
And so that's kind of the background I'm coming from. And in Japan, I mean, there was a ton before COVID. COVID kind of killed in-person events, but I've been looking recently, and I think among at least the Japanese developer community, they've kind of been starting up again, and there are more of these opportunities available. Um, I guess it's always been important to me that like I am also supportive of the existing communities out there and not just doing my own thing. Like when I was starting Tokyo Rubyist Meetup, which was trying to connect the Japanese Ruby community with the international Ruby community, I was also very active going to like the existing Japanese events that were happening and trying to help out there and stuff and trying to just be part of the community there
mm,
too because yeah, it's a bit weird like as businesses we're talking about community, but it's almost like
mm.
antithetical to the idea of
Yeah.
a community there.
We,
Um
we struggle a lot with that, like in the beginning, because we say, like you said, right? Like, you want to build out a community, but also understanding that to have a true community should be pretty organic, and you shouldn't have to tell people, "Hey, you're part of my community," right? They should feel that way. And so, one of the reasons we're kind of slowing down more and more on our own events, and we want to just support other people doing their events and us just connecting with people, is because of that, where we feel more useful helping other communities as well than just doing a lot of our own, because we are a recruitment agency. Because and one of the struggles we had with one is a lot of times was like, okay, how do we do those events without having people feeling like, oh, we're now just part of the candidate pool of InnoHyve. And we got to a point where we're like, okay, we don't want to talk at all about what we do. But then we got to a point where nobody knows what we do. And it's like you mentioned, that icky feeling of like, how do you build a community? How do you do events without people feeling like, oh, I'm gonna be part of a sales pitch, or oh, I'm gonna be sold something. This is something that I think that's why we kind of put more and more energy into the podcast instead of the events, because we had that feeling of like, yeah, but we don't want people to feel like they're part of our candidate pool now, or they owe us something. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm.
is it the same for you when you organize TokyoDev events? Like, do you have the same kind of like challenges?
Yeah, no, it is like interesting. I think because it has been so organic, some people like don't even realize like Tokyo Dev is a business. And like when I like mention I sponsored like the pizza or whatever, they're like, is that really okay? I can pay for it. I can help out or something like that. Like they I guess because like Tokyo Dev has always been kind of quite transparent and wanting to be helpful, and people can maybe feel that. Like they
Mm,
sometimes feel like we aren't a real business there. Um, so yeah, I think that hasn't been such an issue for us because we've been organic, but we also have been quite cognizant of we are ultimately a business as well. And sometimes the business's goals and the community's goals might come into conflict there.
Can you
Like
give me an example?
specifically, for instance, I'm thinking of in our community, sometimes people want to share like uh, experiences about hiring processes with a specific company. Like they're asking, can you share like the interview questions, what
Mm,
you're asked at a company there? And that's something that I think, well, personally, I feel even if there wasn't the business aspect there, a bit uncomfortable about people sharing that stuff because it might lead to them getting in trouble or others getting in trouble there, and we want to avoid that. But especially on top of that, we do have a business relationship there with our companies, and if they're seeing like Tokyo Dev as a place, our Discord is a place where people are kind of like cheating or whatever, it's gonna reflect negatively on us. Um, so I think
that's an interesting one.
we've been careful with like the moderation of Tokyo Dev's community. We want to be quite transparent about how and why we do things, but we're also transparent that like this is a community for a business,
Yeah.
and we need we need to keep those things in
Yeah,
alignment.
and the companies are the ones paying in the end, right? Like, I mean, they are the clients, so to speak. Because
Yeah,
you have
no,
to pick your
that's
side at some point. And this
so
actually, it's interesting because we have the same kind of issues sometimes where our true belief is always like, we are very candidate centered. Candidate
yeah.
experience is everything. That's the most important. But you also have to still acknowledge that the ones paying the bills are the companies that are hiring, right?
Yeah, no, I am someone who's always gonna ch champion the candidate side of things first, but I also want to maintain a good relationship with my clients because then I can have some, like, influence over their process, and so there's things I'll do, for instance, like, a pet peeve of mine is when companies require you to submit your current compensation as part of the application form. Um, because that will just kind of, well, one, it feels bad to the candidate if they're having to declare that because it's putting them in a worse position when it comes to negotiation. It also like perpetuates any pay equity, like if a woman has been discriminated against and has a lower salary because of that, and her next employer is going to base it off her current salary, it's just going to perpetuate that. And there's a ton of reasons why you shouldn't do that. And so like because I have a relationship, a trusting one with the companies, I can like say, "Hey, can you remove this?" And often,
Nice.
well, they've always at least made it optional, if not removed it altogether. And that's only because I have like a good relationship with the companies there. Um, So yeah, I want
That's interesting, Paul, because I do the same with my clients. I don't want to share their current salary.
yeah.
Like it's the same approach because a lot of, especially the people who they come to Japan, they get their first job, and they couldn't care less about negotiating for their salary, so they accept whatever, and they start like very very low. You know, this senior developer who comes in Japan and makes like 6 mil a year, and he should probably be between 9 and 12. But
Mhm.
now he starts at 6, and his next job, like it doesn't matter, and that's one thing that I see a lot of times happening for people coming to Japan for their first job. They're so excited to get into Japan that they couldn't care less about negotiating for their salary. And the yen being so low as well right now probably doesn't help their case. But yeah, this is interesting. Same approach here.
So, if someone is in the position where a company is asking them, what is your current compensation in like an interview or something like that, how do you advise your your candidates to answer?
The way I personally do it is I will not share the information at the screening. But once you get to a point where if for example during the second interview, because the first interview I will say to the candidate don't answer, but during the second interview I will say yeah, feel free to answer now. And I will just ask the clients, like, you know, you gave me a budget and you clearly already signaled that you like that person because he's in second interview. Like, we should be within budget
Mhm.
just because of the fact you moved him to second interview. So the current salary should not be an issue anymore from that point on, right? And so that's kind of how I try to have influence on this. Is kind of showcasing that, guys, you moved on without knowing the salary, and him making 20-30% less than your budget allocated for a position is irrelevant because you moved to the second interview.
Mhm.
So that's kind of usually the way we try to play it. There are companies that really want to know. And then I usually just ask the candidate, like, how do you feel? Like, it is definitely there's some friction there happening. But yeah, I agree. Like, because you know, some people are like making way less than they should.
Mhm.
And especially, I think engineers are pretty not always good at selling themselves and negotiating for themselves. And here's the thing as well, like a lot of engineers, then they were like, oh, I'll trust my recruiter to have my best interest in mind. And it's like, yeah, sure, we make more money the higher we get you a salary, but in the end, a recruiter is also just happy to make a sale. So it's like, don't count too much on the aspect of the recruiter, I guess, in that sense. Yeah. Mm.
So, do you have any advice then for candidates on a negotiation side of thing? Like, if I am a developer who is undercompensated, how
Mm.
can I move up?
Um, it really depends, like the role that like some people will change their job and they also want a career switch. Let's say, you know, you're a backend guy who wants to do a little bit more UI UX. You have to accept then that the client is not going to pay the raise that you're hoping for. So you have to kind of know how long it's going to take for you when you join that company to be fully productive. But in general, what I used to do, because I do less and less hands-on recruitment myself these days, but what I just usually ask as well, candidates, like, do you want me to negotiate for you for your salary? And if yes, here's how I want to play it. And I just explain my angle. And usually I will, if the candidate say, yes, I want you to help me, the first thing I will say to the client is either, hey, this guy is severely underpaid. Here are the reasons why. And my job is then to get you several competing offers. Because if, for example, you apply, I don't know, for just to throw names out there, but Mercari, and Mercari wants to pay you 7 mil, and you feel like you're worth 9. The easiest way for me to make sure you get 9 is to go to I don't know, Rakuten and say, hey, Mercari is offering this guy 7. Can you guys beat that? If they beat it, then I go back to the other one, and that's how I usually play it because then you truly have the market value. So, but it really depends because again, I can only do that if I have true commitment from the candidate side as well. If they work with 7 other recruiters, I can't do that, right? Because all the applications are going through another recruiter. I don't really know if the information I get is relevant. But usually the easiest way is make sure to get competing offers. And if you don't, just bluff. Honestly, I will just try to bluff my way. If you're applying by yourself for a company, I will just say, you know, I have another offer at this or this company. And yeah, I will probably do that if I were a candidate, you know. And the other thing you can do, which is if you're a candidate, let's say you have an offer again from a renowned company at a certain number, contact every recruiter and say, hey, I have this offer right now, but I'm interested in several other companies. That's also a pretty quick hack, right? Because that recruiter will spend very little time. Either they will get you an interview right away with that information or not, and they can beat it. And now you're kind of, well, my options are limited. So those are a couple of tricks that I will try if I were a candidate, I guess. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Um, what's the future for TokyoDev? Like, do you guys plan to integrate more AI and what's not, or automate a lot of stuff? Or for now, you just want to keep it the way it is?
No, I think we're not gonna integrate a lot of AI to us and instead focus on what AI can't do. Like, I think one aspect is this community building, like I talked about. Another is education. One area that we're working on right now is helping Japanese companies understand how they can build an international software development team. Because kind of the limiting factor for TokyoDev's growth right now is that there just aren't a lot of companies in Japan that accept English-speaking engineers there. But at the same time, there's a lot of shortage of labor in Japanese companies among software developers, and so I think if some of the more of them can start accepting international hires, they're going to be more successful there. And so we already have a lot of clients we can turn to. And basically, we've been interviewing them, figuring out how they've been successful at integrating international developers, and then looking how we can turn that into content that can
Nice.
teach new companies who are just kind of considering. We've seen these other successful companies, and how can we become one of them?
What are the challenges you see usually for those Japanese companies to integrate? I guess more. And let's assume that it can. Like, are you able so far among those cases that you mentioned to have those Japanese companies hire people who actually don't speak any Japanese, like English only, or
Uh,
are they always like bilingual?
So we are just at the beginning of this, and so I think it will be a while before we see results from it. But what I've observed is for a Japanese company to become international, they need to have someone who's in a position of authority who is like a bilingual Japanese speaker. Who basically has the company's blessing to do it themselves. And so, yeah, getting that kind of combination is still the tricky part, and actually where someone like you guys can come in, because if you're looking to take an organization from being all Japanese to incorporating English team, you need someone who has kind of done it or at least worked in that environment before, and it can be tricky to sell them on that, and also make sure that they get in a high enough level position in the company that they can actually really influence things there. um, so yeah, it's we're still just in the initial stages of this, but I think Japan is only going to, well, it has to become more international in this sphere to succeed. And I've seen a lot of evidence that there are companies who are interested in this idea, but they just don't know how to start it.
Yeah, it's tricky. One thing that I observed is a lot of those startups that do successfully, I guess, hire foreigners and that don't that let's say like conversational Japanese at most, and they successfully hire those people. It's always for the development team, or and there's such a disconnection still between the sales team, the business team, and the development team, and the whole sales aspect is so. I mean, I see it all the time with clients where they're like, oh, we don't really care about the candidate speaking English. And I'm like, yeah, but that means also that the sales unit cannot speak with the developers. And so a lot of those companies kind of struggle to have really, I guess, an organization that works because there's this kind of, I guess, I don't know, big separation between the sales force and the development team. And so this is something where we try to help as well more and more, is like integrating, the sales manager being bilingual at least, and the product managers being bilingual. And I feel like to what you said, right? That's where it starts, like everything starts to work together, and there's a lot of companies that do it really well. And yeah, big challenge for sure. Uh, Paul, look, we could talk forever, but I loved it. Thank you. This is the first time we had this kind of free flow conversation. Had a lot of fun. Did I miss anything or?
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. It was fun talking with you, and I was glad to hear more about what you're actually doing, and good to see that someone else is trying to pursue kind of similar goals to us in a different fashion.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like I said, we look a lot what you do. We learn a lot from what you do, and it's been a big inspiration. So thank you. Cheers.
Thanks.